Australia. They arrived late.
Yeah,
Well,
I've just put the record on so I can get that.
Okay.
We can record this, so I've just put the record on because that was interesting. So then I can look back on it.
And they did have reserves come up in January. Some of the reserves arrived in February, like 2 weeks before the surrender. So they were really upset because they'd had no training and they were thrown in to fill up the positions of all of those men who'd been lost in the fighting so far. And some of them had never even held a rifle. So they were very undertrained, very underprepared.
Well, the 18th Division, the 18th Division was very similar because that was made up mainly of territorials. My father was in the 4th Norfolks, and so they arrived. They hadn't seen any fighting, of course, although they'd done training, no jungle training, because they thought they were going to the Middle East. So they eventually were sent to Singapore. My dad never got out of Singapore because they arrived when the bridge had been demolished, or the causeway.
Wow.
So they were he was the 18th Division, mainly the Norfolks, Cambridges, and everyone. They were put on the northeast side of Singapore. The Australians were on the northwest side of Singapore. Percival thought that the Japanese were going to try and land where the territorials were, on the northeast side. But of course they didn't. They landed on the Australian side, and they hadn't really done anything at all to stop them landing. So that was quite easy for them to get ashore.
Well, they blew a hole in the bridge, but the Japanese, I mean, they came down and they were able to, like Dad said, it was only a matter of hours, and they put pontoons down and they were already crossing. And Percival had enough intel to tell him that they weren't coming in the northeast at all. So he had the majority of the British Army all over there with the smaller number of Australians protecting where the Japs all came through. So you have to look at the way that they process the intel. I don't know if you've read Gordon Bennett's autobiography, and he was scathing because he said, that he was they were in possession of intel that they were just ignoring. And he was saying in his autobiography, written after the event, of course, that, he was saying, oh, you should be doing this and you should be doing that. But because he was just an Australian, they were just ignoring him and he didn't get anywhere.
I think there was too many, really. There was too many putting their oar in, and it wasn't just Percival's fault. Heath, there's a lot of them. They just didn't get together. And the worst thing was they set it all up for Matador to stop the Japanese landing, and they didn't even put it into operation. So the Japanese just had an easy line to get in. There was so many mistakes made. They just, at the time, they just thought they were invincible, and that was it. The Japanese weren't good fighters and everything, but of course the Japanese were good fighters, and and the things the Japanese used about getting round the back of us and attacking from the back, so we had to retreat. Jungle warfare. We learnt it, so we used it when we retook Burma. We used exactly the same tactics as the Japanese did, and we beat them by doing that. But in Singapore, we just didn't have any idea.
The British colonel that was in charge of retaking Burma, he was well trained in jungle warfare. He also, I've read his book, and he also was advising the British generals in charge of the beginning of the war, what they should do, and they were ignoring him. Now, he escaped. He used those tracks and trails, the jungle trails through Burma, and escaped to India. and then he put into practice what he'd wanted to do because he was put in charge. So it's not, there was men around who knew what they were doing, but I guess it's the same everywhere. When you got too many chiefs and not enough Indians,
Yeah,
you get
yeah, yeah.
it was sad. But the
Well,
Japanese were they were so well fitted out for that jungle warfare, and they were also very well informed. And the British had been, and we're talking like Churchill he was very arrogant in a lot of what he did and said, overrode a lot of what was, advised to him. And but they were well aware before the war even started that there was Japanese spies all throughout Malaysia and Singapore feeding intel back to Japan. And the powers that be in both America and Australia and Britain knew that the Japs were getting ready for war. So
yeah.
I think the
Well,
British relied
yeah,
on their pact that they had an agreement or a pact with Japan after the First World War, and they were relying on Japan never attacking them or that's what I read, that the
yeah,
top
Yeah.
echelon was thinking
yeah.
they would never attack Britain.
Yeah, but you've got to remember that Japan, they'd had a lot of war before they attacked Pearl Harbor and Malaya.
Yes,
That
yes,
they'd been at war with Korea, China, so
yes,
they had their forces were well trained, where we
yes,
weren't. We weren't. We
yes.
just our territorials. I mean, uh,
Mm,
they got them fit, but that's all right being fit.
mm,
I said to my dad, because my dad was a Bren gunner, and I
mm.
said to him, "Did you ever shoot any Japanese?" He said, "I pointed my gun and fired it. I don't want to know if I killed anyone."
That's right.
No,
Well,
you
that's
know,
right.
yeah, it's war is a funny thing. I mean, it's not a funny thing as such. It's I mean, Churchill. Okay, some of the things Churchill did, like the 18th Division to Singapore, were
Mm,
bad. But in a way, I wouldn't have liked his job. It was like a game of chess. He put in a pawn, which was the 18th Division, to save time for him to do other things. I couldn't do that. I mean, he was strong enough to do that. I was brought up at school on his speeches.
mm.
When I was at school, his speeches were played on the
Me too.
gramophone.
Yeah, me too.
And he was a great speaker. But
He
so was
was.
Hitler.
Yes,
So was
yes,
Hitler. Hitler was a
yep,
brilliant speaker. You didn't have to
yes.
understand what he was saying. That was his
Very
tone.
rousing.
And oh,
Yes,
brilliant! He was absolutely brilliant speaker.
yes,
And
yes.
I couldn't do that. I couldn't do what Churchill did.
Mm,
Churchill,
mm,
you needed someone like Churchill there to actually
mm.
help us win the war. But
Hello,
uh,
Ray. We can see
hello,
Ray now.
yeah, we can
Hello.
see Ray. Hello, Ray.
Diane,
Okay, Ray, can you hear us, Ray? Have you got your
your
mic
screen's
on, Ray? No, I'll turn your mic on. Can we
We
hear
can
you now?
see you, but we can't hear you.
Just say something, Ray. No, we
No,
can't hear you.
no
I've just
mic.
turned your mic on. No, you haven't got your mic on, Ray. Can we hear you now?
Over on the left-hand side of your screen, down the bottom should be a mic, and you can click on that to turn it on. It'll have audio off on the left-hand side of your screen, or somewhere
How's
on
that?
there.
Is that okay?
Better, yes,
We've
hello.
got you. We've got you. Yeah, brilliant, Ray.
Okay, good.
So
Good.
at the moment, Ray, we've got Diane from Australia, and Kevin is in Italy on holiday. Where are you coming from, Ray?
I'm coming from the Principality of Diggle, which is in Oldham, Lancashire.
Okay.
So we're getting round the world now.
Yeah, very exciting.
Yeah, Kevin.
Well, I'm still very interested to find out then which regiment that Joe Higgins was in, because
Yeah,
he considered my dad his best friend in the world. They met obviously on the railway, and because they were kept very separate when they were first interned in Singapore in Changi Province. But once they were on the railway, there was some blending. And I actually came to England I was there in 75, 76, and I met Joe, and he was the first person to ever talk about my father as a hero. And I was
yeah,
very, very touched to meet him. When they separated on the docks, my dad had given him a quoit that that Joe said my father treasured, and he gave it to Joe for safekeeping. And Joe had that on his mantle with his OBM, and his son was there and his grandchildren, and they told me that this was their pa's most treasured possessions, was this quoit that father had given him and his OBM. So yeah, it was an amazing meeting, but I hadn't started research then, and I was so moved by what he was telling me. I didn't ask any questions. We stayed in contact for years until he died in 1993. He died 6 months after his wife,
yeah.
and
So
he was
Diane, was it Joe Higgins?
Joe,
H-I,
double
H.
Gins.
Yeah. Can I leave you to talk and I'll just have a look? I'll leave you three
Okay,
to talk. Okay.
okay.
You carry
I
on.
can look. I can email you. I have before, and you gave me his service number. I've got all that, but it just says that he was in the 18th division. It doesn't actually say what regiment he belonged to, and I would like to find his son or his grandson. He's got a grandson called Paul, and a son called Tom. And I've looked on the phone book in England, but I haven't been able to find them. But yeah,
So what was his first name? Joe?
yeah, Joseph Higgins.
Joseph. Just a moment. You three talk. I'll be back.
Okay. I've still got his details in my book, I think. He's a lovely man.
Diane, do you know what camps he was in?
I know that he was on the Burma Railway with my dad. At some point they crossed. That's where they met, and they stayed friends forever. And they used to talk on the phone, even when it was $2 a minute to ring from Australia. They still talked on the phone. But Joe told me that he saw very early on the railway that his only chance of, this is his words, his only chance of survival was to volunteered to serve under an Australian doctor in the cholera camps, and that's what he did.
Diane, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you give me his serial number, which I gave you?
Now I don't know if I wrote it in my book. I know that
Because I've looked up Joseph Higgins and I can't find anything.
I might have to look at my emails. Hold on, I'll just have a quick peek at that. So you'll disappear from my screen for a minute, if that's okay.
No,
And
I think you carry on. Actually, you could still see me when I was looking, couldn't you? Was I
yes,
still?
I can
Yeah.
hear you, but I've just shrunk the screen. Let's see. Here we are. Higgins. Okay. Sorry, I'm just. I know you sent me a number, I'm sure you did. Yes.
Just a minute. Just a minute. Go on then.
His number was S/250346. Private J.F. Higgins, RASC, 18th Division. So I don't know what that means. What's RASC mean?
No, I'll have to look it up at home because I'm not getting it out. I'm not getting out on my files at the moment, so I'll have to look at that at home. Are you enjoying that cup of tea, Ray?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, I've got mine here. Yeah. Is it the same where you are? Because our weather in North Norfolk is terrible.
Oh, it's horrible. It's just rain, grey skies, and then yesterday was remarkable. We had torrential downpours, and then 2 minutes later, hot sunshine.
Oh, yeah. Sounds like Melbourne.
Yeah, it's actually been the same here.
Yeah.
The sky looks good, so we go out for a walk, and we just get down the road, and it absolutely pours.
Yeah.
The trouble is we've got two dogs,
right,
and one of them's a Westie. He's 17, so he's getting old. So you've got to be careful how quick you walk. And the other one, he likes all the mud, so he gets himself absolutely muddy.
Right.
But
I always say to people about Melbourne weather, if you don't like the weather in Melbourne, wait half an hour.
Yeah.
Plenty of variety here.
Yeah, Diane, can you write all that down on an email to me? And then when I get home, I'll see what I can do. At the moment, I think that's because we've got this video link going. I haven't got the bandwidth to get out to find out any more.
That's okay.
I can. I will at home. I will at home. So just write me an email and I'll do it. Okay.
Thank you.
That's all right. Right. So
now I'm the research officer for the ex-POWs of Victoria now. So if there's anything I can help you on the Australian end, just let me know.
Yeah, will do. Will do. Ray.
Yeah.
You're into Ubben, aren't you?
Ubon, yeah.
Yeah, Ubben you call it. I call it Ubben. You see, I only see it written down. I don't talk to anyone. So
right.
It's Ubben. So you're really into that. Did you see the emails on Facebook about the latest ones? I meant to email you about it because the lady in question, she wrote that I think it was her uncle was at in Thailand when it ended, and I had a look, and I think he was at Ubon.
Oh,
Did
right.
I get that right? Did I get it right? Ubon.
Ubon, that's it.
Ubon.
The full name is Ubon Ratchathani, but most people say Ubon.
Oh, well, I say Ubon, but I'm Norfolk, and we talk proper here. No, I'll send you that so you can have a look and see, because that, in his liberation form, he also had the RMS who was in charge. So I'll send it to you and you can have a look and see what you think.
Yeah. Okay, that'd be good. I've contacted probably about 20 families now who had relations or contacts at Ubon, and it's very good to make contact, because there's very little known about the camp. It's only when you start digging quite deep that you can get the details, and hopefully I'm getting a lot of detail about the camp and in the process of writing it up. It just wasn't a camp. It was, the stories behind it are interesting as well, because it was Ubon is located in the northeast of Thailand, which is quite a long way from Bangkok. It's about 500 miles east. So communications were non-existent actually. And the camp was liberated by a gentleman called Major David Smiley, who was with the Special Operations Executive. And he was connected with the Seri Thai, who were the Thai resistance movement. So the stories behind that are very, very interesting. And it gets involved with politics and what was going on in Thailand at that time, which, you know, when you're doing research, you open a door and you see something else and you're off down there. Well, I've gone quite a long way down the Seri Thai story as well, which is even more interesting because the Thai people are very secretive about it. And you have to be careful about what you say, because in Thailand they have these strange laws called lèse-majesté, which says that you cannot criticise the royal family or the government. And the penalties for doing so are very, very harsh. For example, the King of Thailand died about a year ago, and one Thai subject shared the BBC obituary for the king, and he's ended up in prison for 5 years just for doing that.
Oh,
So you
dear.
have to be very, very careful about what you dig up on the Seri Thai. But it's fascinating, and you know, one day I'm sure all this will be, you know, revealed and published. But
So have
Ubon,
you found anything about Boon Pong in when you've been looking up the Thai resistance? Does he come up at all?
Yeah, well, Boon Pong was more on the railway side, on the west side of Thailand. But of course, his stories are legendary, aren't they? And
they are the most amazing when you understand that him and his wife, his whole family, would have been murdered, but they took their life in their hands every day and smuggled all sorts of things to the POWs. And he was part of the resistance, of course. When Weary Dunlop came back, he was so, as were all the men, so beholden to Boon Pong that he set up a trust, and it's still going today. And another time, Boon Pong's business was suffering in the 1980s, and it was made known, and to the Australian, all of the battalion associations, and they had a collection, and all the men, I didn't know, my father didn't tell me, but all the men put in, even it would have been my dad as well, they all put in money to send over to Boon Pong to bail him out. Because they just owed him, as far as they were concerned, they owed him their lives. An amazing story. I never even heard about it till after my father died.
Yeah.
So I find that so moving. And they've never done anything. Maybe it's because of that, but they should do a movie about it. I mean, there's plenty of movies. Why don't they make one about, you know, real heroes?
Yeah, true. Yeah, the other thing about Ubon is Colonel Philip Toosey was the commanding officer of most of the British POWs that was in there, and he got involved by commandeering a train from Bangkok and travelled to Ubon. That's why they built a camp at Ubon, because there was an existing railway between Bangkok and Ubon, and Colonel Toosey took this train, and he actually led the formal liberation of the camp with Major Smiley. Fascinating story.
What year was that?
Yeah.
What year or month was that they were liberated at Ubon?
It was August 1945.
Okay, right.
But that was the same Toosey as the bridge over the River Kwai. That was the same Toosey, I take it.
Yeah. It was, yeah. And I'm in touch with his son, Patrick, who you probably know, Ronnie. Patrick Toosey. He's and his granddaughter, Julie Summers. She wrote the book on the Colonel of Tamarkan.
Yeah.
This one.
That is a very good book. Yeah, I've got that. Yeah, that's brilliant.
Great book. And she's sent me some of his personal records as well, which is very helpful.
I took a lot of a lot of poetic license or artistic license when they made the bridge over the River Kwai. I mean, it's not even
Yeah.
where it really was, the house of
No,
the Bridge
no.
of Cards, they called it.
I think really what my dad hated the film. He really did hate
Yes.
it.
Yeah, my
But
dad too.
in other words, you know, that did bring the FEPOWs some cause for their, you know, to bring them to the forefront. The Bridge over the River Kwai was a bad film, but in other words, that was good for the FEPOWs. So we can't pull it down completely. But how can you have a Frenchman writing a film about the bridge over the River Kwai when he wasn't even there? You know, it's ridiculous.
What about the movie King Rat, which was based on a
Yeah.
book that had written? My father hated that. He said it wasn't
Mm.
like that at all, and you know he was appalled about that movie King Rat. We always
Yeah.
laughed and joked and said it was really about him because Dad's nickname was Mouse. Because they called him Mouse because they said there was no prison that could keep him in. He could get in and out of anywhere just like a mouse. And because he used to go out foraging and getting food and bringing it back in. But he never told us that. I didn't know that.
My
Whenever we
dad's
asked
yeah,
what his life,
yeah. My dad said that the Australians were the best foragers there were.
yeah.
No, no, he did, honestly. He said if you wanted anything, ask an Australian.
My dad, when we asked him why they called him Mouse, he told me it's because he liked cheese. So I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
find
yeah,
out about it until after he died.
yeah,
So there was a
yeah.
lot he could have told us, but he didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My dad, he said he was when he was in Thailand, because he worked on the railway, he said they'd stopped the truck and they sat to eat their rice. And he said the Japanese was put his rifle against a tree. And before you knew where they were, a Thai had come round the tree, pinched his rifle and was off with it. He said the Thais were good at that.
So what force did your dad go out onto the railway in?
What, my dad or
Yes.
Ray's?
No,
My dad went out with the 18th Division.
no,
He
the
was
force. The Japanese gave them a
oh
force number. A, B,
the
C,
first number.
D, F.
My dad was in the first mainland party, train number 1, so he was there right at the beginning. Uh, in a way, that sounds bad, but it wasn't,
Was
because
that A force? A
no,
force?
no, that was they didn't have a force name. They were called the first mainland party.
What year? What month and
Not
year did he go out?
June 42. That was the
June.
first. Yeah, that was the first train from Singapore to Thailand. So
You
he
sure it
was
wasn't A force? Because A
no,
force went out
no,
about then. No, okay.
no. A Force went to Burma.
They did, yeah, that's right. Yeah,
No, this was
yeah.
Thailand.
Okay.
Dad was in the first mainland force, train number 1,
Right.
but that wasn't as bad as you think it was, because they got to Thailand and they had to get the service yards ready for the tracks to come in and everything, and the huts ready. So their job was really to clear and prepare for the forces to come later. So
Right.
that wasn't as bad as you think it was. Later on, when they moved the service yard further up the railway, he was sent up the railway and he did,
Mm.
see the collar and everything. But in a way, he was better off being on that first train. The F Force and H Force were the worst, because
My dad was in H force.
they were the ill ones. They were the ones that were taken from hospitals and everything, because the Japanese wanted more workforce
Mm.
on the railways. So they really did lose a lot of men. But
Well,
Dad's
the other thing
force,
was they were made to walk. They had to walk to
Yeah,
their designations. They didn't go there
yeah,
by train or truck, and they were
yeah.
lied to. F Force was made up of 7,000 men, and H Force was made up of 3,000, and they were split between about half and half British and Australian. And
Australians,
my
yeah.
dad was actually, he wanted to go out in F Force because most of his mates went then, but he was in hospital with dengue fever. And they were told that they were going to a camp, like a recreational holiday camp, and that
Well,
they
to
could send the
convalesce,
sick. Yes,
yeah, to
yes.
convalesce. But one of the best books, one of the best books you'll find is so, someone's got feedback. Someone's got feedback. Uh, that's why it's best to wear headphones,
Right.
because if not, you get feedback. Anyway, one of the best books is John Coast's. If you want a good book to read, that was published 1946, so that was really in his memory, and it's a brilliant book. And that was on F Force, and
And what was
that is
that called?
um, that's either the Railway of Death or the Death Railway. Railway Death. I can't remember. I'm not a Tom, and I can't see my books, but it's a brilliant book. If you just look up John Coast on the internet and Death Railway, you'll find it. It's a brilliant book, and he describes it so well. They've just released a new version, which
I've got
includes
that.
more appendices, and it's really um, the new book is better, but I've got the original, and that's one of the first books I ever bought. It was and Dad read it, and Dad said that's the nearest book he's ever read, and he read it from cover to cover, and he'd never read any of my books. So he said that's the nearest book he could read to what happened on the railway.
Yeah.
Well, how do you spell his name again, Ronnie?
That's John Coast. Coast as in Coast.
I've actually got the latest version.
Yeah, the latest version has got more in it because
Yeah.
it's got the appendixes with a lot
Yeah.
of a lot more information at the back. But it's really worth it, Ray. It's a brilliant book.
Hmm.
And he describes how they walked through the jungle and what they came across, and it is absolutely brilliant. And he does describe. Now you might say I've got this wrong, Ray. Rumusha, the
No.
the yeah, the native labourers. He describes their camps.
Right.
You've got to remember, Ray, that most of my research is reading and not talking, so I don't get the words right when I pronounce them. But at least I've got the words.
Yeah.
But no, it's that was a good book. But some of the books I've read, the problem with the new books coming out is their hearsay. There've been stories put, from word to mouth, and they're not the original. And some of the original ones, one of the first POWs, except for Dad's friends, I got in touch with was Morris Rooney. Now, I did write his story on there years ago when he was alive, about year 2000, I think it was. And he went to Thailand, so he worked in the coal mines or copper mines there. And his brother was Leslie, was actually on the railway, and he didn't find out till after the war finished that his brother actually died. It's when you read some of it, and he liked Dire Straits' Brothers in Arms, and he said, "Can you use the music, Ron, and call it Brothers in Arms?" And that's his story I wrote on the web. And he was such a nice bloke. He was really, some of the old FEPOWs had character, and you could talk to him. And one down the road, because I have put a lot of lot of stories within Far Eastern Heroes, and another one was Jock Simon. He wrote Hell in Five, and that's another good book. And he used to come into my shop in Yarmouth and talk to me for hours. He was such a storyteller. You could really, not untrue, but telling stories, and he was absolutely brilliant at it. He was 4th Norfolks, and he went with my dad to enlist. But some of the FEPOWs were brilliant. You could listen to them for hours. They could really talk. And some of the stories, and Dad, okay, we only hear in the latest books, you tend to hear all the gruesome details, but you don't hear about their mates and how they got on in the camps. And they were close. They had laughs. They didn't. That wasn't all doom and gloom. They did have mates, and they had laughs. They played games, and when, of course, my uncle was a FEPOW, so we used to go round his at Christmas, and we used to have all the games they played in the camps. The Priest of Paris. I don't know if you've heard the Priest of Paris. We used to play that, and there's games they played in the camps. They didn't need anything.
They played coins.
Yeah. But they played games. That wasn't all doom and gloom. And my dad actually, he was a good footballer, and he played Golston, and he actually played for England in the camps because they had international matches. They had the Australians, the Welsh, English. They had international games, and he said the best games were against the Japanese because they did actually play games. He said it was payback time. They did actually. He said they were only small, and we used to go in hard. My dad played centre half, so he was a hard tackler, and he said we used to go in hard, and that was payback time. But
Well, in Australia, more particularly in Melbourne, and it really is only in Melbourne, every year on the first Tuesday of November, we have the Melbourne Cup. And the interesting thing was that when they were interned, the Australians managed to convince the Japanese that the Melbourne Cup, which fell on or around their emperor's birthday, that this was a holy day for the whole of Australia. So they let them run the Melbourne Cup. And they used to have horses, which were men, and jockeys who were smaller men, and they would have the betting. And it was really, in fact, a book has been written about that. And the president of our association, his his grandfather won the Melbourne Cup at Tavoy, and he's still got this little Melbourne Cup that was given to him.
Dad did tell me about the horse races.
The Melbourne Cup. I mean, it really, at that time, was only celebrated in Melbourne, wasn't even celebrated in Victoria. But they conned him into it was a very special holy day for all Australians.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we've had a good chat. Can you, Diane? Can you send me that information about your dad's friend, and I'll look that up. And it's lovely, great to see you, Kevin. Great to see you, mate. I hope you've heard most of it.
Yes, I've been here. I haven't said much because of the sound so terrible.
Well, yeah, the sound does break up from you at the moment, but when you get home, you'll be okay. Ray, I didn't know if I told you, Ray. Kevin's on holiday in Italy.
Yeah, I knew he was in Italy. I wasn't sure whether that was his place where he lived or whether he's on holiday. But
no, we have got another. That's
very,
oh yeah.
Oh, now I'm jealous.
Yeah.
None of the rain.
But
none of the rain.
But we have got another. We've got another Australian just joined. So we've got now 2 Australians, Diane and another one, and we've got a French he ain't a French man. He's a British man living in France, and he's said he'd try and get on as well. So we'll have. I think Saturday and Sunday is the best time
I
because
think it's
then we can communicate with Australia, because if we communicate at 10, their time is 7. Is it 7, Diane?
It's 7 now. It'll be
Yeah.
8 when we go to summertime. Sorry, no, it's not. It's 9 hours difference now. It'll be 10 hours when we go to summertime, and then it'll be 11 hours when you go back to Greenwich Mean Time. So
Yeah.
10
Yeah.
o'clock here, when it's 11 hours, will be 9 p.m. here. So it's still quite doable.
Yeah. So I think 10 o'clock UK time is a good time for us to
Yes,
get in touch with
yes,
you as well. So I think Saturday and Sunday. You all agree with
yes,
that?
yes, very
Yes.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah.
My
So
social life on a Saturday night and a Sunday night is practically non-existent.
yeah.
We'll be
No,
right.
no dancers in Melbourne then.
Only if I got invited to a wedding, which isn't happening that often.
Yeah. Don't you find now? I mean, yeah, I think I'm older than you three, but don't you find that when you're younger, it's engagements, then it becomes weddings, then it becomes christenings. Now all I see is funerals.
Funerals.
Oh, that's horrible, isn't it? Yeah.
I've had 10 this year so far.
Oh, that's
10.
horrible. Yeah.
It's been a horrible year this year.
This year's been a horrible year for the FEPOWs because there's been
Mm,
so many pass away this year.
mm,
Mm.
mm,
That hasn't been good. But anyway, it's
mm.
great to see all three of you, and
Yes.
Yeah,
and
it's been good. Yeah.
yeah, we've got 4 of us on at the moment. Yeah, it's been great. I had 5 last time, and they were all different, so we know we've got 8 or 9 now that can communicate. Some of the members said they wouldn't, which is fair enough. I mean,
Mm.
but if we use it for a general chatter and discuss research, would that be okay?
Mm.
Absolutely. And while we're at it, before we close off, it's time nearly for us to renew. So you need to let me know what I've got to put in way of, because Australian dollars that'll meet
Yeah.
and cover the cost of the annual, including the cost of this if needs be.
Yeah. Well, Gillian is now going through she's got a book and she's going through it now, sorting out the renewals. And
Good.
I like last week, I honestly, I'd like to thank all of you for helping. It's been great. It's been a lot off my plate because now I know that this, I think I've told you that this happened when I was in hospital with pleurisy. I didn't honestly think I was coming out. And all the research I'd done in the past, I mean, I have been researching for a lot of years. And this goes back to when I read my dad's diary in 1960s, when I was in my teens. And I understood what he went through. So then I started reading books, because at the time there's no internet, of course, so it was all reading. So I started reading books and getting books about it, and so it's a it's getting it all together over the years and putting it on the web, and we don't really want to lose that. I don't want to lose it. And when I was in
Oh,
hospital, I thought I wasn't going to come out. I thought all that stuff is going to be lost, and it keeps their remembrance going. I mean, the same as you, Ray. When you do put all your stuff together on Ubin, did I
Ubon.
get it right?
Ubon.
Ubon. I'll never get it. I'll never get it. And that's honestly something I've found this last couple of years. Honestly, my memory is getting terrible. My memory, honestly, is really getting bad. Names, I'm terrible on. I have to look up my records to find names now. Where before that was so easy. getting old is not great.
It's not good, is it?
No.
Ubo. Do you have Ubo taxis? Do you
No,
have Ubo taxis?
no.
Oh,
Uber.
okay. That's that. Ubo. They're a
You have,
taxi
you
thing that
have
come from
Uber.
over. Uber. Oh, well, that tells you I never use them. So I was just going to say,
Yeah.
Uber and add Ubon.
No.
Yeah,
When I say Ubben or Uben, he'll know what I'm talking about.
yeah, yeah. No,
You've got to put.
there's a funny story here because there's Ubon Ratchathani and there's Udon Thani, two separate places. And
Oh, okay.
Are
a
they
friend
close
of
together?
mine was who visits Ubon Ratchathani like me. He flew from Bangkok to Udon Thani because he got mixed up with the names.
Oh, oh dear.
And it was only when he arrived he realised that he was in the wrong town. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think these chats are quite good because it gives a little bit of incentive and encouragement. With the research, it's a lonely business. Sometimes you can be,
Mm,
deep down in something and getting a little bit disenchanted sometimes. I think, but sharing the research with a group is really good and it keeps you going. And I think the other thing as well, Ronnie, just um, moving on from what you were saying, is that all this work that we do is a legacy for somebody,
yeah.
and it has to be put somewhere. Just before I joined the meeting this morning, I was posting some details about my father's military. He was in the European war. He was a Normandy veteran, and I've got quite a lot of memorabilia from his wartime days, and I was just going through that, and I was thinking, what's going to happen to this after I've gone?
Mm,
It can't just be left and end up in some charity shop somewhere. It's got to go to the right place, and it's a problem for us all, isn't it? It's
mm.
Yes.
work that we do, and the rows of books that I've got. I don't want them to end up in a charity shop because that's where I've got most of them from, to be honest.
Yeah. 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 My bookshelves are full of books on FEPOWs, and you know, my son and my two daughters aren't really that interested. I mean,
Mm,
when we had FEPOW Day, we went out on a walk from the caravan to a place. I'm not a churchgoer, although I was a choir boy and everything. Now I'm not a churchgoer. I like my quiet. If I want to think about something, I'll go somewhere where I'm quiet and I can look back and remember. I don't like to go to church, to be honest. I
mm,
find it cold, but everyone to their own taste.
mhm,
I'd rather go down a fish pond when I'm at home, or here I'll go for a walk and have the quiet. And on FEPOW Day, my kids come over and we went for a walk to my favourite place, and we just remembered Dad. I
mm,
mean, to me, FEPOW Day is a day I started way back in 2006, and I sent loads to the government to try and get them to call it FEPOW Day, but they said they couldn't because of VJ Day. So they said, we've got VJ Day, we don't need FEPOW Day. But we've used August the 15th as FEPOW Day since then. And even though it isn't official, we call it official. And it's a good day just to remember them
mm,
and look back on what happened. So if you can promote FEPOW Day in any way, I'd appreciate it. The badges we have, the pins, I mean, they're what I paid for them. And I get them from Michael Hurst in Taiwan, because you've heard of Michael Hurst. He runs the Taiwan FEPOW
mm, mm.
site, and his firm makes pins, so that's where I get the pins from. I get them from him, and it's a good day just to look back and say that's our day. That's our day to remember them. But as you say, Ray, it's keeping that going, keeping that remembrance going, and my sites can add anything you want to add. So you can add it in the Roll of Honor, or you can have a subdomain and call it what you like, and that can be a subdomain of FEPOW family. So you have your own site, which you can add things to yourself. So you can do that if you wish, and you wouldn't have to pay anything for it. You know, that will be part of FEPOW family, and you can call it Urban.
Ubon.
You got it. You can call it that, and you can call it what you like, and you can add to it when you like. So you can set up your own site within the FEPOW family. So it's worth thinking about. That's worth thinking about.
Yeah.
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 Just going on names, Ronnie, about Ubon. My wife lives in a village not far from Ubon called Tamawang.
Yeah.
And it's the same spelling as Tamawang in the west on the railway.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I got a little bit confused when I first met my wife, because I was Googling, going back 10, 11 years ago, and Googling, Tamawang, and it always started throwing me back to the railway.
To the railway, yeah. Yeah.
But anyway.
Did you meet her when you went out there?
No, well, I worked in Singapore and Hong Kong and Bangkok for a few years, about 10 or 11 years ago. And that's how I met her through work.
So what is your job, Ray?
Now, well, I'm semi-retired now. I'm a will writer, write wills.
Yeah. Oh,
I
I might need you soon.
Don't leave it too late, Ronnie.
Yeah.
You should have your will written. I've got mine done.
Yeah. And before that, I was in IT. I was a project manager in a big company that provides catering in airports around the world. So I was lucky for 17 years. I travelled the globe putting in computer systems.
Well, I was stuck in our shop. We had because I'm a television engineer,
right.
and I used to build computers. So we had our own television shop for 37 years.
Yeah.
So I was stuck in Yarmouth for 37 years in a shop. So I didn't see the world like you. But when we always said when I was going to retire, we'd go to Singapore, halfway house, then go to see Gillian's brother in Australia. So that's what we were going to do. But then I got pleurisy, so I can't fly now. So I'm stuck. But it's just one of those things. I enjoy what I do. I enjoy research. I enjoy it.
I can see that.
Well, yeah.
Emails at 2 o'clock.
Can you never fly?
No.
Has the pleurisy stopped you from flying ever?
Yeah. Yeah, I can't fly now. I had a lot of problems with my lungs with pleurisy. I can't fly.
Wow.
But that's okay. I've got over it. You know, I'd like to go on and see where Dad was, but you know, it's one of those things.
Well, you could always sail out to Australia. They still have ships that come out here, you know.
Yeah, you talk to my wife about boots. She hates boots. She just goes down the gangplank and she's sick. Yeah, she doesn't like boots at all. But that's ever so peculiar because I come from Galston, and my father had 12 in his family, and my mother had 9 brothers and sisters, and they were fishing families. So all my families are fishing families,
right.
driftermen, and they used to follow the silver dart, which was the heron. So you know, I love the sea, but my wife doesn't. So no, that's out. That's out. I can't leave her behind. I don't know what I'll find when I get back. No, she's ever so good. We're different. My wife likes paperwork, where I'm more practical. I'm hands-on, you know. So we're different, but that makes a marriage, you know. That's she likes doing her paperwork, so that's it.
So you fill in each other's gaps.
Yeah, you do really, you do really. I mean, she worked at NatWest, you know, that's a bank in Yarmouth. She worked there, and then she worked at Norwich County Courts, doing paperwork. So she loves it. Where I'm just hands on. I just like I used to love television work, but that got boring. So, you know, replacing a panel in a television is not my idea of repairing a television. So in the late 80s, I got fed up with that. So I went on to computers. So I built computers, and I enjoyed doing that. That's what got me involved, really, because we ran our own ISP. So right in the early days, if you remember, it was modems. So you connected to the internet via a modem. So our ISP used modems, but then when it got onto broadband, I stopped it because for the customers we had on ISP, that wasn't worth it. So I went on to using a different ISP, which we now use e-hosting. That's where all my sites go through. So if you want to, Ray, I can get you involved in your own site, and you can put all your information on how you want, and you can, you know, that will be a subdomain of the FEPOW family, but that would be your own site with your own domain. So you get your own domain and run it from there.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
think about it.
We're very behind here in Australia because we're still on modems and landlines.
Are you honestly? Oh well,
Absolutely.
I'm sitting here getting this from our caravan Wi-Fi. So we've got our site manager runs a Wi-Fi. So I'm sitting here. All this is coming through our Wi-Fi. It's good,
I'm
but
very nervous about Wi-Fi. Do you do your banking online?
Yeah.
the wife does as well.
How
Yeah,
secure is it with Wi-Fi?
very secure.
Okay.
Okay.
That's very
Okay.
secure. I mean, it's it's the way of the future, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, it looks like it. Looks
yeah.
like it.
I mean, now it's getting to a stage you don't carry money around with you anymore, which is getting a bit. I'm old-fashioned. I don't have a card. The wife has a card. Oh, she has a few cards, but I don't have a card. I'd rather carry money around. I'm old-fashioned, but that isn't that way anymore, is it?
Well, no,
Well,
I use
I
my.
like money to take money rather than a. But I do have a card as well. You have to remember, guys, that you got TV in 1946. We didn't get it to 56, so we're a good 10 years behind you. Yes, the phone.
Yeah.
That frightens the life out of me.
It's the future.
Yeah, that is the future. I mean, now you walk into a shop now, you don't even have to put your card in, do you?
No. That's what that is. It's Apple Pay. You just put your card, your computer there, and it's done. You don't need.
You're more advanced than I am, Ray, because I don't have all that. The wife does, but I don't.
I control my central heating off this. I've got a doorbell with CCTV. So if anybody rings the doorbell and I'm sat in the house in Thailand, I can answer the door for them.
Yes, I've seen that. They're advertising that here, but I don't. I've been thinking about whether to get that.
It's good.
I've got an iPhone, so I think I could, but I'm a bit hesitant.
No, I think
like
it's good. It's good security as well as when you're out of the house. If somebody comes with a delivery, you can explain where to put it, or they come back.
The problem is, Ray, I went into Screwfix the other day because we wanted something for the caravan. So I went into Screwfix to get it, and their computer had broke down. And they just didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
They all stood around looking at each other, and they had to get the catalogue out in the end, looked through the catalogue to find it. They couldn't look for it on the computer, so they had to find it on the shelf to find if they had it. Oh, that was brilliant. That was really brilliant.
Yeah, single point of weakness.
Yeah. But anyway, thanks for all of you, and I honestly thank you all for helping. I do honestly. I really am over the moon with the help I've got, and let's hope we can keep going forward and find out things. I'll hear from you, Diane, with your information.
Yes.
Kevin, next time we hear from you, you'll be able to talk well. Did you hear that, Kevin? Yeah.
Yes.
Thumb
The
up.
sound's coming here.
Yeah. Right. And Ray, we've communicated quite a bit, Ray. So that's nice to see your face. Know who I'm talking to.
Likewise.
And now you know when I write it down, I get it right.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you all, and we'll see you again. If you want to join next week, that is just going to be a trial, but you can join in. We can have a chat. We'll have a chat next Saturday though, not Sunday, because I changed it. So the lady who said she had to go to church can actually get in as well.
Join in.
I honestly forgot about church when I decided Sunday was the best day. But if we, I think this way is quite good, and then everyone gets a chance and to talk. I mean, today, it's been great talking to you.
Yeah.
It's been great putting a face to the name, and thank you, Ronnie, for all you've done.
Yeah.
No,
that's
okay. No, I enjoy it honestly. My dad, I will say that my dad, one of my dad's things was, and it was right until he died, he used to have nightmares about leaving his mates behind. And when I started the Roll of Honour, I started it to try and soothe his anxiety about leaving his mates. That's why I really started writing on the net, because of my father. I mean, he died 2001, and I'd started most of the sites by then. So he understood what was going on, and that's really, first of all, I used to put on all my sites. They were for my father, but of course now the FEPOW family is helping a lot. So as long as you understand, it was my father that really started these sites. Okay, so all right.
Okay.
Thanks everyone, and might see you all next Saturday at 10 o'clock. And you, Diane, you can work that out. All right. See you later. See you later.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.